Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Mavuika has been out for quite a few days now and I've seen many claim that she is terrible without Citlali and Xilonen. Today we'll investigate that claim as well as to see what a free-to-play friendly Constellation Zero Mavuika is capable of. This has been a really hot topic, with countless debates about her needing Xilonen and Citlali. In fact, it's gotten so heated that the usually very civilized discourse on the internet is looking a bit more chaotic. But you know why you're playing this game? Because you're a gooner. Well, I've got the perfect sponsor for you, Polybuzz. Tired of boring conversations with actual people? Well, you can have wacky and sus conversations with all your favorite characters and idols thanks to today's sponsor, Polybuzz. Link in the description below with code IWTL777. Chat with your stepdad. Help! I'm stuck in the washing machine. You're a goddamn dumbass. You know that? Okay, not the direction I was expecting that to go in, but that's fine. Well, we all know how devious Paimon is because Paimon is actually one of the kings of hell, and there's certain to be skeletons in her closet. Tell me about the emergency food in Tevat. It's delicious, right? Stop calling me that! Yeah, I've seen you eat it before, and you're emergency food, right? Well, why are you asking me that? So now that we've established that you're emergency food and you've eaten emergency food, what does that make you? Okay, fine, I'm a cannibal. Now stop making me think about cannibalistic stuff. I want to think about something else. I knew it. Paimon was a cannibal all along. As you can see, the fun doesn't stop there with Polybuzz, as there are so many custom AIs created by people just like you. Not only that, but you can generate images as well, like these surprisingly cute images of Paimon's cannibalistic tendencies. And best of all of this stuff is free. Just smash that link in the description below with code IWTL777. Huge thanks to Polybuzz, and back to the video. Let's take a look at a week 1 Mavuika with a bit of math and some elbow grease to figure out whether or not she's as bad as everyone is saying without her number 1 and number 2. Here is my Mavuika's build. She is using either the Mailed Flower or the Tidal Shadow depending on what team she's on. She's of course using the 4-piece Obsidian Codex with an attack percent timepiece, Pyro Goblet, and crit damage circlet. Her talents are at just 6, 6, and 8, and of course she's at Constellation 0 throughout this entire video. My artifacts are certainly better than the average free-to-play players, but again her talents are at 6, 6, and 8, and that leaves a ton of room for improvement over the next few weeks, which I'll talk about some more concrete numbers a bit further in this video. As always, it is very important to emphasize that every player's account is at different levels of investment, so some of you free-to-play players might have a stronger or weaker Mavuika than the one in this video. Starting off with her kit, we all know by now that her basic attacks are for those Mavuika vs Capitano cutscene enjoyers who wish she would use her claymore instead of her motorcycle. Yeah, they're not very good, so let's move on. Now I won't bore you with a super detailed breakdown of her kit because by now most of you know how she works, but basically her elemental skill allows her to mount her motorcycle where she can perform some stylish motorcycle related attacks like these basic attacks, charged attack donuts, and even dash plus plunge attacks. The damage of her motorcycle attacks outside of her burst isn't going to be very impressive, so let's see how she does with her burst with 200 fighting spirit. Well, that's more like it. With her basic attacks and some animation cancelling, she's still able to single cycle our Reg's fine friend. Let's try the donut variation next. An even faster single cycle of our Reg's fine friend. But we all know that Mavuika is meant to be played with reactions. Let's melt her burst as well as activate the Mailed Flowers passive. Yeah, this is where her power lies, and even at this level of investment, she's able to one-shot our Reg's fine friend. This is notable because of an important detail from earlier. Her talents are just at 6, 6, and 8. Because of her talent levels being so low, a double crown Mavuika with talents 6, 10, and 10, will do 12.5% more damage on the initial hit of her burst and nearly 25% more damage on her donuts. Yeah, she's missing a massive amount of her damage based on the talent levels alone. We can expect Mavuika to do around 20% more damage than this Mavuika in just a few weeks once we've gathered enough dragon body parts to fuel her motorcycle. Now, before moving on to the crux of this discussion, whether or not Mavuika is good without Xilonen and Citlali, we'll need to build a team for her, a free-to-play friendly team to be exact. And would you look at that, her banner. This looks reasonable enough. We have a Natlan character, Temu Citlali, and the true Pyro Archon. Let's see how they perform as a team together. Well, an initial 635,000 nuke with Mavuika's burst, plus a follow-up melt for 163,655 damage. Now, unfortunately, while Diona's Constellation 6's Elemental Mastery buff adds a lot of damage, Diona's cryo application is really poor. But still, this is, in my opinion, an incredible amount of damage for just how free-to-play friendly this team is. Now, Bennett's Constellation 6 is highly recommended for the 15% pyro damage, and Kachina's Constellation 2 is also actually helpful here, because we need to use Mavuika's burst more than once in the Abyss. A big concern with Mavuika is her not getting to 200 Fighting Spirit without Xilonen. As we can see though, with a few tricks such as using a few basics during downtime, and burning through more of Kachina's Night Soul points faster than usual by jumping around on her super twirly turbo swirly, Mavuika is able to build a very respectable, I think like around 180-ish Fighting Spirit. While it's not ideal to not have 200 Fighting Spirit, the difference between, for example, 170 Fighting Spirit and 200 Fighting Spirit is around 7% more damage with max level talents. So yeah, you're not actually missing out on a huge amount of damage by being at a nearly full, for example, 170 versus 200. This is not the biggest deal in the world, and it's why Kachina, while certainly not as good as Xilonen is actually just fine to use as Mavuika. Now, admittingly, a big weakness of this team is the complete lack of resistance shred, aka, well, you don't have Xilonen's resistance shred. As in 12.2.2, you really want resistance shred against this thing since it has 35% resistance after it's recovered from paralysis. This is one unfortunate weakness for this very free-to-play friendly Mavuika team that otherwise is, in my opinion, perfectly reasonable in terms of power level. But still, as we can see, even with this very free-to-play friendly team, this team was perfectly capable of 3-starring their side of the Abyss 12, thanks to Diona's archery mastery skills shooting a giant robot chicken out of the air. Anyway, there are of course other cryo appliers, with one of the smoothest being Constellation 2 Rosaria. Rosaria also applies cryo once every other second, similar to Citlali, and by simply using her burst first and then her skill, it lines up really well with Mavuika's melt timings, allowing her to melt a similar amount of times as with Citlali. Granted, Rosaria of course doesn't provide all the damage buffs that Citlali does, only a bit of crit rate. But this is yet another very free-to-play friendly alternative that Mavuika can excel with. But the fun doesn't stop there, because we have another, even more free-to-play friendly character than Rosaria. We have Charlotte. Charlotte is interesting because she can hold the thrilling tales, although admittingly she has some pretty bad energy issues. Still, we're able to get some very juicy melts, and clearing 12-1-2 with this team was no issue at all. Now overall, the smoothest 4-star only team in my opinion for Mavuika is an overloaded Chevreuse team. This team is not as free-to-play friendly because you'll need Auroron. My Auroron is at Constellation 0 here, although my Chevreuse is at Constellation 6. But we can see just how easy this team is to use with no need to wait for any specific timings or delay any charge attacks to melt specific attacks. This team in particular was the easiest out of all of them for clearing the bottom half of the current abyss, thanks to Auroron being a bow character to shoot the robot chicken out of the sky, no energy issues like on Diona, and the 40% resistance shred from Chevreuse for 12-2-2. But yeah, this team isn't as free-to-play friendly as the previous teams, but if you do have all the necessary characters, this is a very good feeling team. Let's say you do have Mavuika, Xilonen, and Citlali, all with free-to-play friendly builds, what can you expect? Okay, so first of all, my Xilonen is indeed at Constellation 2+, but we can simulate her at Constellation 0 by simply equipping an HP % timepiece on Mavuika to get this very respectable 850,000 damage nuke. This team is incredibly smooth to pilot, needing minimal shenanigans and shortening rotations down to 18 seconds, thanks to not relying on Kachina's 20-second skill cooldown. What's especially crazy about this is how this 3-cost team, with each cost being a limited 5-star, is already at a maxed out C6R5 Raiden team's level of nuking power. Granted, Kazu's constellations and Raiden's constellations 4 through 6 don't help much, but this really demonstrates how far your Primo Gems go in today's economy in comparison to the Inazuma era. I know we're comparing apples to oranges, but I still thought this was worth including to show how much things have changed over the years. Now this next team legitimately shocked me, but it's a no other Natlan character team with Xingqiu and Sucrose. While the 5 stars from the golden days might be quite outdated by today's standards, the same cannot be said about the 4 stars. Sucrose provides similar or even larger damage buffs than Xilonen, and Xingqiu is, well, Xingqiu. Ironically, because of the longer rotation due to Xingqiu's really long cooldowns, we are free to spam normal attacks which not only do very reasonable vape damage, but also fill up Mavuika's fighting spirit. In fact, by the second rotation, we're still looking at a 140 fighting spirit burst. While you are losing around 15% damage, this is still plenty of damage to clear what you need to clear, highlighting Mavuika's damage potential even with extremely suboptimal teams. And just for fun, let's try a completely free-to-play friendly nuke setup. $1.8 million damage against the Hat Giant robot with a very free-to-play friendly setup. Personally, I think this is quite a reasonable showing for what we're working with here. Now you may have noticed me waiting around for Mavuika's skill to hit the enemy, and yes, that has been intentional throughout the video to activate the Mailed Flowers passive whenever I was using it. Sadly, I didn't get to Mavuika's off-field capabilities because frankly there is just way too much to cover for this one build alone. And this is largely due to our ever-expanding roster with so many different permutations in the modern era. Regardless, even in one-cost situations where you only have Mavuika plus 4-star characters, she's quite a capable character, although nothing earth-shattering at just a one-cost you only have Mavuika type of situation. At Constellation 0, one single 5-star levels, she's a perfectly reasonable above average DPS character. Although it is definitely worth re-mentioning that her talents in this video were only at 6, 8, and 8, leaving out around 20% of her total damage output, which is a ton of missing damage. Although it's also worth mentioning that my artifacts are likely a bit better than most people's, compensating for a few of those missing percentage points. My point though is that after just a few more weeks, Constellation Zero Mavuika will be even stronger than what was demonstrated in this video. Also, the moment you invest even a single 5 stars worth either horizontally with new characters like Xilonen or Citlali, or invest vertically into Mavuika's weapon or constellations, Mavuika becomes a comically powerful character, redefining low-cost power levels moving forward, and similar to Diluc on release or Raiden in Inazuma and Neuvillette in Fontaine, Constellation Zero Mavuika teams will set a new baseline likely until we reach Snezhnaya, as each new region tends to gradually power creep the previous. Personally, I'm expecting the Pyro Archon to pilot a giant Gundam at the rate we're going, but we'll just have to see. Overall, Mavuika is an incredibly strong DPS character, even without Xilonen or Citlali. Granted, melt setups take a bit more finesse to use than most teams, which is, in my opinion, one of her bigger drawbacks. Timings and rotations matter more in comparison as well to a character like Neuvillette, so there is also that to keep in mind. Anyway, let me know what you think about a free-to-play friendly Mavuika's power level down in the comments below, and whether or not you felt like this was a reasonable representation of a well-invested Constellation Zero Mavuika. Also, huge thanks to Polybuzz for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to check them out down in the description below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.